for the excellent introduction, Cyrus. Like he said, my name is Cindy Krum. I'm the CEO of a company called Mobile Moxie based in Denver, Colorado. We do mobile marketing consulting and mobile SEO. And I've been doing mobile SEO since before the iPhone existed, so I've been doing it for a while. The topic of my presentation, or the title, is called Mobile SEO GeekOut. And frankly, I'm ready to geek out, so let's go. I'm going to start easy and get geekier as we go. So this is the easy stuff. This shows a timeline of Google's growth in traffic, as well as the innovation, the things that they're working on. And what I want you to realize is the stuff in the most recent years has all either focused exclusively on mobile or has been like a throwback, a benefit to mobile that they plan to capitalize on in the future. Google really, really cares about mobile. And that makes sense, because mobile traffic is growing. I don't think anyone walked in this room thinking anything different. Mobile's taking off. This is a graph that shows traffic by device, and it's just for the travel segment. So what you can see is the gray, the seasonal kind of desktop traffic over time, but then the growth of mobile in the green and tablet in the yellow at the bottom. And so this is just one segment, but Google knows mobile is growing, and it's growing really fast. In fact, it's projected that desktop traffic is either going to flatten out or start to decline. What that means for you as an SEO is you have to start paying attention to mobile. If you're not paying attention to mobile, you're going to miss out. You're already missing out, but you're going to miss out even more. So this is what we're talking about. Last month at a conference, Matt Cutt was talking about mobile, and he admitted that Google never expected mobile to grow as quickly as it has. They just weren't prepared for the growth. And then he said that mobile traffic has not quite surpassed the number of desktop traffic searches, but he said it will very, very soon. And that's what this looks like, and that's why mobile SEO is important. So that makes sense, right? Mobile overtaking desktop, because the devices are with you all the time. When you're not at your laptop, when you're not at your computer, when you're not at your house or your work, you still have your phone, maybe you have a tablet. And so that's expanding the reach of search into the rest of our lives. When we're out living our lives and not just sitting at a computer, that's when we use mobile search the most. And this kind of shows you, it plots it out by day. So you expand your appeal in terms of time and also in terms of use case, right? This makes mobile ideal for cross-device marketing and for really integrated marketing, because they have the devices and they can interact with TV and with outdoor media and stuff like that the computer just wasn't very good at. So I've shown you a lot of graphs and charts, and frankly, they're interesting, but I want to warn you. If you're getting into mobile, if you're doing research for your company to see where's the mobile market at, there are a lot of conflicting statistics when you get into the nitty-gritty details about mobile. And the main reason for that is that mobile's kind of hard to define. Everyone has in their mind what they think of as mobile, but they never think to question what the researchers think of as mobile. And so I've seen conflicting stats because they were not including tablets as mobile, or they were including tablets as mobile, or they weren't including feature phones as mobile, or they were, or wearables, or web-enabled game systems, or whatever. So I want to warn you to be wary of mobile statistics. Be smart about the mobile statistics, and take them all with a grain of salt, unless they say exactly what you're looking for them to say, and then totally go with it. Okay. So this is important for SEO, and this might seem elementary, but I want to go through the differences of how a mobile search result looks to a searcher. First off, very simple, smaller screen, less results above the phone. In both of these examples, what you see is a maximum of 2 results showing above the fold. So the one on the right, 1.5. You don't have the option to rank really low. You just won't get seen. It's like being on the second page. People like, when they're searching on mobile, to click on the first result. Now, that has mixed blessings, but one of the good things about that, or one of the lucky, fortuitous things, is just that in mobile search, branded searches, or what we call navigational searches, where they type in exactly the website they want to go into the search box rather than the address bar, much more common. So that's good for you, potentially. If you've done the mobile searches and you've checked all of the links, including the indented results, and then in mobile, we have a lot more what we call sub-links. They have an Ajax expandable arrow, and they're very light gray, but you can see it if you're looking really hard, and you click it and it points down. And these indented links, obviously, are to help the searcher out so that they don't have to go through the homepage if they know what section of the site they're on, and the sub-links get you even deeper into the site. The problem is, these are kind of hard to control, and in the mobile world, a lot of the time desktop results are pulled in. Mobile rankings are very tightly related to desktop rankings. They're not separate things, and Google will often rank pages that you wouldn't expect them to rank, pages that you haven't mobilized. Even if you're in responsive design, some sites will do responsive design for most of their page templates, but not all of them. And it turns out that the ones that they don't do often are critical and show up, they get lots of searches, they drive lots of search traffic. So this is the first thing that I'll do when I start an audit, is I'll expand all the indented links, all the sublinks, test them, and see, is it a good landing page? These are the pages that you're going to get the most mobile traffic from because they rank on your branded search. And so you need to make sure these are all good experiences. If you have a responsive design, one set of URLs, we'll talk about architecture more later, but if you're using the same URLs for mobile and desktop, and you have a bad experience on one of these indented links, you're going to have a really high bounce rate on that page coming just from mobile. But it's the same URL, so it could hurt you in the long run on all devices. Next, PPC is a big deal. I don't do lots of PPC, but I watch PPC because in mobile, the pay-per-click rankings really push down the SEO rankings. Even ranking #1 isn't good enough because sometimes, well, I mean, it's got to be good enough, it's good enough. But if there's PPC results there, there could be as many as 3 at the top of the page, 3 at the bottom of the page. And if there's 3 and they're big with lots of stuff going on in the PPC result, it can push the first organic ranking totally below the fold on the mobile result. So you've got to be super careful. Obviously, in PPC, most people, they won't be bidding on your brand terms, but you need to be looking to see if your competitors are bidding on your top non-branded terms, and if they are, in mobile, it could be pushing your result, still ranking first, but it could be pushing it below the fold. So that's a problem. We also see a lot more universal style results showing up in mobile. And that makes sense from a Google perspective. They show you images, videos, news, stuff like that, because those results look really great on mobile phones, and they're really touchable, right? They capture your eye, even if you're only like halfway paying attention because you're driving or something, and they get the click. So when I look at a mobile optimization campaign, we look at the option and usually follow the option to push those universals because they're going to have an easier time ranking in mobile. And when you push like an image result or a video result, there's less that you're competing against. There's less in those result sets. And so it's almost like cutting in line. You just don't have to try as hard to get those to rank well because there's less competition there. But it's great because you kind of get floated to the top. Awesome. Next, obviously, location is a huge deal in mobile. About 1/3 of the mobile search traffic has a local intent. And so location, ranking in location, super important. Testing your local landing pages, making sure that the addresses are mapped to the right place, that the phone numbers are clickable, you have your pictures of your store, open hours, all that stuff that you would hear in a local SEO talk, super duper important for mobile. But mobile it's irritating for me a little bit because you see all these logos, like Google can't figure out where to put local. They've had Google Places and Google Local, and now we have Google Plus for Business, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to keep track of all the rebrandings that Google does for their local stuff, but it's worth it if you're trying to drive foot traffic. Now, what you have to remember with local results is this is kind of like what Rand talked about this morning. They may not click through. It's harder to measure map results and things like this because people might get exactly what they need from the Google result without ever getting to your web page. So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at the stats and say, you know what, a lot of the traffic might not even get to the page, but they're getting to the store. OK. This one is kind of complicated, but I'm sure you guys have all noticed that when you do a search on your phone, sometimes there's desktop results, and a bit more rarely there's mDot results or mobile results. And that's kind of confusing, especially if you have a mobile site like an mDot, and you're like, hey, where's my mDot? It's showing the desktop. How do we get it to show the desktop? And the truth is, a lot of the time, companies who make mobile websites, mDots, they don't do a great job of optimizing their title tags or their description tags. They just forget. They don't realize that there's such thing as mobile SEO, so they just don't do it. And so what Google has done is, unless you have really, really great metadata on your mDot site, title tags and descriptions, then they'll usually show the desktop results. So they get the great title tags, they get the great descriptions. But once they've crawled enough times where they hit the desktop site with the mobile crawler and they see that it's redirected to an mDot page, what they'll do is they'll show the desktop result, but they'll do a skip redirect. And they'll say, this one always redirects here, we know it. And so they don't even serve your desktop page to wait for the redirect. They actually straight up serve the mobile page that they know it's going to redirect to create a better user experience, to create a faster load time on the mobile page. So they're doing that for you. So don't panic if you have an mDot and you don't see your stuff. Make sure, though, that you're clicking through, that it's getting to the right page, and that it's loading very quickly. And you'll know if it hits the desktop and then shows the mobile URL, then you're not getting skip redirect, and there might be a problem. So that's how you would check that. Something else that Google is doing a lot of, and this is kind of a mixed blessing, is that they're doing a lot more knowledge graph results. And knowledge graph is kind of like Google's version of Wikipedia, except they show you the answer straight in the Google search. And they do this a lot of different ways. Sometimes they'll do it for currency conversion, and you don't have to click through to a web page. They'll do it for flight times, company profiles. And this feels a little icky, right? They're taking your content. They're preventing, in a way, stopping people from getting to your web page. So that's not awesome. But what is awesome is that knowledge graph is really, really likely, if it's going to show, it's going to show at the top. So it's kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them. You know Google wants to show knowledge graph style results. You may as well mark up your content so that they can scrape it and get it, because you'll float to the top easier, and you'll get more eyeballs on your page. And this one, it says trusted sources, and then it says activity. What it's also pulling in is it's looking a little bit at QDF, and it's giving you the company profile, and then query deserves freshness style, looking for the newest stuff on the site, in this case, a recent blog post. And it's pulling that in as well, because they assume that mobile searchers are time sensitive, and they usually are. So that's a good assumption. So you've got that to look for. Next is the kitten, the touchable slide. In mobile, we do a lot. There's a lot of strategy that revolves around making the search results look touchable, look like something that you want to reach out and touch. And that's often done by putting microformats and schema.org markup onto the page. When you do that, you get things like star rankings, you get things like recipe pictures of a beautiful souffle or whatever, calorie counts, cooking times. Recipes are a big one. But also, you used to get authorship, not so much, or you used to get the picture. You don't get that anymore. But all of the kinds of markup that you can use really do show and help drive click-through in mobile. Because it doesn't mean anything if you rank and you don't get the click-through. So we're trying to do two things, right? Make them touchable. Good for mobile. Now, I haven't talked too much about tablets, because tablets kind of make this a bit more complicated. But what you should realize is that mobile search results, obviously, differ from desktop results. They look different, and they're sometimes ordered differently. The same is true for tablets. So you could have one set of results for desktop, one for mobile, and another for tablet. Now, they're not going to be wildly different, but they can differ. And the inclusions, the number of universals, the number of map stuff, that can all change depending on device. And it's not just from mobile to tablet, actually. It's actually by device, and more specifically, by screen size. And this example, it's the same search, and I'm going to show you on the next slide how it changes. It even changes from landscape to portrait. You can see the related searches on the right on this screen, all gone, down at the bottom. So that all changes how people are searching. And it's harder to measure, but it's important to know, important to be aware of. All right, so let's get a bit geekier. How is mobile SEO as a practice different? What do I do different during the day than a regular SEO would do? And so there's three kind of main groups that I organize these thoughts into. The algorithmic focus for mobile is a bit different. First, you have to realize there is a mobile crawler that's crawling content as if it was an iPhone 4. And they're ranking things. It goes to the same index, but a different algorithm is used to rank things when you do a mobile search. They can detect that you're on a mobile phone, and they change things. Usability, Google is starting to crawl for usability, especially on mobile, because they want to rank really good mobile experiences. Desktop linkage, how well, if you have desktop and mobile URLs, how well is the desktop able to share its rankings, and how well has that been set up to do it? And then, so that's algorithmic. Strategically, I focus a lot more on the look of the SERP, the look of the search results, and then getting those micro formats right and compelling and causing people to want to touch. And then social. Social's a big deal in mobile, obviously. And then the last is, and this is kind of where I tend to spend most of my time, is the technical stuff. Mobile is very technical, so I end up doing a lot of technical SEO stuff on mobile sites, because a lot of the time developers have never built mobile SEO or mobile sites, or they're using platforms, or there's just a lot of technical errors that can happen that you have to be careful about. So this is kind of how I visualize or I think about it. In mobile SEO, you either have a multiple URL site where you have mDots, maybe even tDots, and the desktop, or you have a single URL solution where you're serving everything from one set of URLs. And in general, the orange piece shows that a lot of mobile SEO is just creating or maintaining a strong association with the desktop content that's already crawled and indexed. Beyond that is where I spend a lot of time. After we've got that done, which can be a task, it can be hard, then the nuance comes in getting the schema and page speed and the usability up. So here, here is the secret underbelly of mobile SEO, is I spend so much time sorting out things like crawler confusion, really inefficient crawls, loads of domain errors that can be caused by developers or platforms who just don't understand SEO, and other kinds of problematic indexing. And so mobile SEO is actually less about rankings per se, and more about creating a successful kind of mobile traffic interaction. And honestly, it's about making sure that you and your brand don't look like a moron on mobile. Just keeping it real. So let's get into a little bit geekier realm. We're going to talk about mobile architecture. So this is the easiest kind of architecture to understand, because most of us have seen it and perhaps done it, is having an mDot with mobile-specific pages and having a www with your desktop pages. You can even add in a tDot if you want for tablet-specific pages, but the idea is these are separate pages on separate domains, and you use what's called user agent detection and redirection to get people to the right version of the page for the device that's requesting it. So what will happen is the desktop page is ranking. They click on it from a tablet, the server sees that they're on a tablet, and automatically redirects them to the tDot version corresponding page, or mDot, or what have you. And Google's created something to help us tell them when we're doing this, and they call it bidirectional annotation. And what it means is, on the desktop, you set up a tag in your head that says rel alternate, and you link to the alternate versions of the page, so the mDot version from the desktop in the code. And you say, hey Google, we have an alternate version of this page, it's mobile, and it's right here. And you could do that for tablet too. If you have a tablet tDot, then you do both of them, and you link to both of those pages. And then on the mDot, you link with a canonical tag back to the desktop version. So you create this marriage, right? You create this thing where they're both pointing at each other and they're tight, right? It's saying, Google, these two go together, they should be combined. And then they get to share SEO value, so that's great. The next option that Google started to talk about is called selective serving. And that's almost the exact same thing. You create two different pages, but you teach your server, you tell your server, to instead of redirecting to a different version of the page, just to serve a different version of the page on the same URL. If you've been in here a while in the SEO industry, this might sound a little bit like cloaking. I think it sounds a lot like cloaking, but Google has okayed this. As long as it's for the user experience, and as long as they're going to be crawling with both crawlers to match up which page is serving what, and they want to see a really, really tight connection between what's on the mobile page and what's on the desktop page, or else you risk penalties, right? So don't do that. Don't spam. Last option, this is Google's favorite. It's called responsive design. This is where you have one set of HTML content, one set of URLs, and you control how the content displays based on screen width using style sheets and media queries. And so stuff grows and shrinks and rearranges itself to fit on whatever device that requests it. And so this is Google's preference. They've said it. Now, a common question I get is, hey, we got a call from this platform, and they said that they're really good at SEO, and that they're really good at mobilizing stuff. Should we use this platform because it's really cheap and it sounds great? And the answer is no. Please don't do that. Most of the mobilization platforms have no concept of SEO, especially advanced SEO and technical SEO techniques, and I have seen things that would give you nightmares, or at least me, because I'm an SEO. But they're not good. So if they do, if you do have to go with the platform, remember, you're going to have to do the SEO yourself. Don't trust the platform, especially look for all the errors that they create. So let's get back to responsive design. Responsive design is important because it's Google's happy place. Google made all its money crawling and evaluating desktop pages. So responsive design is the closest they can get to continuing to do that because they do it well. So that's their happy place. They want to be there. If you think about it, it's also more efficient on their resources, like their crawlers and their indexes, their servers, because they only have to crawl it really once and then maybe another time with the mobile bot, but it's not as important to have the mobile bot going back constantly. It takes up less space in the index when you don't have to index 2 versions or 3 versions of every page. It's just easier for them. And also, Google's algorithm relies heavily on links and social shares. And it's hard when you put things on separate URLs for Google to understand when something's relevant based on a link. Because if someone's sharing an mDot page, then they have to go back and say, oh, does this redirect from mDot to desktop if someone clicks on it from a desktop? It gets very complicated. Google doesn't want a deal, so they're pushing responsive, and they're saying it's the best. Here's the problem. Responsive design can be very, very slow, and it's a skill. To build a responsive design site takes more than reading an article about how to do it. And so a lot of responsive design sites end up being heavier and slower than the desktop site that they're replacing. And that's a problem when you realize that now you're having to cram this heavier, slower page onto a mobile phone over your carrier network. So it can create a bad user experience. So you might do it in the name of SEO, but then you're creating this horrible user experience on your website, and that's a no-win situation. You don't want to do it. And so we get in this catch-22. Google prefers responsive design, but Google prefers fast pages. But Google prefers responsive design, and so you have to be really careful. So for all of the architecture options that I talked about, it's really, really important. Google cares about page speed. And it's especially important in mobile, and I think it's given more weight. Google hasn't come out and said it per se, but it's given more weight in the mobile algorithm. Just trust me. So page speed is important because, first off, if you have really slow, heavy pages, it'll slow down the crawler. It'll hurt your crawl efficiency. The bots won't get as much content when they come to your site. fewer pages are indexed, and they're indexed less often. It's also just really bad for user experience. You have high site abandonment, high bounce rates, stuff like that. So people ask me, how do I know which to choose? When do I choose responsive? And the simple answer is, if you have a simple site, responsive design is going to be much, much easier to do. If you have a very rich, complex site, it's going to be way hard, and you have to prepare yourself and make sure you have the right team ready to do it. So let's dig in here. Let's talk a little bit more about page speed, because this is super important for rankings and for creating the conversions that you want. How do we do it? And I've kind of broken things out into different levels of complexity or geekiness. So this is the simplest thing to understand, is designing for mobile first. It sounds simple, but if you make your developers and your designers draw out how the page is going to look on a mobile phone before they even think about a desktop, they're going to have a much easier time, because they're going to isolate what is critical on the page, and then as they get more and more room, they can add in the less critical stuff. It's much harder to go from a big, awesome desktop website and then cram it into a tiny mobile phone screen. So designing for mobile first is a big deal. There's a lot that's been written about this. Sorry. So that's level geek. That's pretty easy. Think about mobile first. Next is removing unnecessary code. And this sounds, again, easy, but I'm not really so much talking about HTML comments and stuff like that. What I'm talking about is unnecessary JavaScript and unnecessary style sheets or style sheet processing that has to happen. Those are what really slow the load speed and make it a bad experience. And I know plenty of developers who would just link every single style sheet that's present on the site on every single page. Bad idea. Please don't do that. It's horrible for mobile load time. Next is just basic stuff. gzip all your files, including the external files that you request on the page, and minify it. That just means removing the spaces, and there are tools to do both of these. Make your life easy. It'll help make them smaller. But the problem is you can't gzip images, so you have to save them properly, and just save them at a low level, the lowest you can without affecting the quality of the image or the way it appears. And also, if you can, don't put separate images. Avoid the big, heavy images. And if there are small icons and stuff like that, put all of those together in what's called a sprite. And then that makes it one request instead of many requests, and that'll speed up the load time too. So let's talk more about round-trip requests. Round-trip requests are a big deal, and most desktop developers don't think about round-trip requests very much. But in the mobile world, it's the requests, the number of requests, that'll slow down a mobile load time more than the file size, usually. And so what we see is that if you're used to building for a desktop, you could have like 100 requests, 100 round-trip requests necessary to build a page. The problem is, in mobile, every round-trip request is like 200 milliseconds. So every 5 round-trip requests equals 1 second of load time. That's the math that Google does, and that assumes 3G, 4G connection. It's not like a slow connection. It's a good connection. So every 5 round-trip requests, 1 second. So you have to be really cautious about how many round-trip requests you have. You have to do things like consolidating your CSS. There's no reason any page needs 8 CSS calls. There's no reason any page needs 10 font calls. You need to look at how many times you're going back to the server to get stuff. Consolidate CSS, consolidate JavaScript. Those bits of code can be put into the same file so that they become one request. Well, CSS and JavaScript, but all your JavaScript in one file, all your CSS in one file, if possible. It's usually not. Usually you have to get to 2 or 3 or 4. Fine. The other thing that Google cares about more and more, and this is odd, is they care about the order of the code. They're now telling web developers that they should inline their JavaScript and inline their CSS if it controls the design on the mobile page that happens above the fold on the screen. So you take it out of the external file, you put it into the page, and that eliminates the round-trip request that was slowing it down. That's different. That's new. The next thing they want you to go for is the CSS, because those can be downloaded in parallel. And the last thing they want you to go get for external requests is the JavaScript, because those block other things from downloading, so you want to get those last. And you want to defer the parsing of those things until the top of the stuff, the top of the page above the fold has loaded. So when I talk about inlining JavaScript and style sheets, it's very different. It's a violation of XHTML guidelines. I know, but Google says to do it. So you take that code, and you don't put it in the body. You put it where? That's funny. You got to look. It's my favorite slide. All right. Next level of complexity, we call it Wozniak, is Google has started to care a lot about your HTTP headers. What's an HTTP header? Oh my gosh. It goes before the page. When there's a page request, it goes before the page code, and it prepares the browser for what it's about to get. And Google's page speed tool has been reporting a lot about two kinds of caching: browser caching and proxy caching. Browser caching is like on the phone. It saves backup copies of things you've requested before. Proxy caching is like at the ISP level. They save things so that they can say their network is really fast, so they send it so it doesn't have to go, the request doesn't have to go all the way back to the server. So it kind of looks like this. The server says blah, 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 and the browser and the ISP are like, hey, wait, we've already got this. We don't need to wait for you to send it. We've got it. And that ends up making the page seem faster, even if it's requesting the same amount of stuff. The last thing, Google has started talking about the HTTP header, a varies header. And this is something that you can do on any kind of site that has mobile-friendly pages. They want you to set varies:user agent. And that's an explicit signal to Google that you have mobile-friendly content that you want to show. And Google's going to see this and say, their content varies based on user agent. Got it. Usually, many sites that are especially if you're using gzip, it'll already have varies:gzip, which just means this page varies based on whether or not you're getting the gzipped version of the page. But so you add comma user agent. It varies based on these things. That helps caching. The problem is it can sometimes mess up your CDN. So if you do it, be sure you do it with the blessing of Akamai or CloudFront or whoever you're using. Don't do it without them, or you'll be wasting your money on CDN that's not working. Second favorite slide. Google cares a lot about user experience. And in the page speed tool, they've actually included things that have nothing to do with page speed in a beta label. They're about mobile user experience. So they don't give these results to desktop, but they say, look, if you're expecting this to be a mobile page, you need to have appropriate font sizes and appropriate tap target sizes for a mobile user. It needs to be a good user experience. So you need to essentially not make your fingers feel like shit and want to kill themselves. Next. So some companies are saying, hey, we have a really good idea. We're going to do this thing called single-page mobile site architecture that makes the website perform like the app, and it's so lovely, and it is lovely. But the problem is it works a lot like an old-school Flash site where they literally use one URL, and then they use JavaScript calls to make everything happen. So when a bot gets to that, if it's not set up properly, they get the one URL, and that's it. They don't rank any inside pages. So there are SEO guidelines for this. Google hasn't written that. Well, I say guidelines. Cindy's guidelines. I wrote them in my head. Not on the web yet. But Google hasn't written guidelines. Google hasn't endorsed this. They probably never will. But if you have something like this, you have to set up what's called a headless browser. That's like the bot without his head that's knitting. Headless browser that's going to go create these URLs. And you have to make sure that the web experience that has one URL matches exactly what is getting indexed when something that can't execute JavaScript crawls the site. And then things should still get indexed if you're very, very careful. I don't recommend this. It's terrifying. OK, so social. I mentioned social. Mobile and social are kind of BFF. Most social interaction is going mobile in a big, big way. Less social interaction on desktop, so you have to pay attention to social. Google has tried to get the corner on social, and it hasn't worked, right? Google+, lots of people not there. But watch out what Google's doing with social, because it's going to play in, and it's super important on mobile. Now we're kind of in the future. Google's also talking about entity search. And so they're trying to scrape things and understand things in a more natural way and disambiguating things like freebase the software and freebase the activity. And so they've bought this company called Freebase, which that's the idea, is entity search, understanding things and how they relate to other things. And I think that's important for the future of mobile. Open Graph, these got out of order, but Open Graph is important. If you're sharing things, you need to make sure that they're sharing properly on mobile. And then back to entity search. So Google wants to understand, mostly so they can show stuff in Knowledge Graph, but also they're doing a lot more with voice search and Hummingbird. Everyone's familiar with this algorithm update, focused on natural search queries, and that's really important to Google too. So when you put these things together, the voice search, entity search, knowledge graph, the scraping of Schema.org, Google's really trying to own and still really understand the world and present it in search results. And so that gets us to an app which doesn't get a lot of play on iPhones, but is a big deal on Android phones because it's preloaded, called Google Now. Which is kind of their intuitive digital assistant. It tries to predict what you might search for before you even search for it. And it's kind of creepy sometimes. But they're using the knowledge graph and the entity search eventually and to pull in and anticipate what you might want. And they can see your location. So like every time you leave home, it'll tell you you're 15 minutes from home based on our traffic estimates. And you can set location reminders. It's like, hey, next time I'm at Target, remind me to get paper towels. And like geographically, it knows when you walk into Target, and it goes dee-dee-dee-dee. And they're using this. It's very heavily focused on voice search, and I think that they're using it as a beta for things that they want to push to Google.com. But it's a mobile app, so it's kind of, I think, a glimpse into the future. And that all makes sense when you realize that Google has been developing wearables like Google Glass. Because those, you don't have a keyboard to input things into. You have to do voice search. And doing voice search when you're wearing Google Glass makes you look nerdy. So it wants to anticipate so that you don't have to look like a nerd. I don't really love Google Glass yet. I think Google Glass is kind of like a Segway for your face. But it'll get there. I trust that it'll get there. So that's it. That's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Awesome job.
Yay!
I am a desktop guy, and that was probably one of the best mobile SEO presentations I've ever seen. So that is awesome. As a desktop guy, though, I couldn't help but notice that so many things you were talking about were a lot of the same things we preach in normal desktop search, site speed, schema, everything else like that. So there seems like if you're implementing good mobile SEO, there's dual benefits there.
Yes, there's definitely dual benefits. But what I usually say for mobile SEO is like we take all that stuff a little bit more seriously because there's more serious consequences if you don't have good page speed. You notice it way more on the phone.
So this is more of an observation than a question. In our biannual correlation ranking factor study that Moz does, the last one we did about 13 months ago, site speed was a factor that we found some significance in. And Google has said site speed's a regular factor, but we're measuring desktop search in that correlation study. And maybe mobile is something we can measure in the future. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. You work with hundreds of mobile sites. Do you have anecdotal evidence or casually observing, when you do speed up those sites, actual improvements in rankings?
Yes. Yes, and I've seen sites that go responsive with a really great team and that get faster, and that Google does seem to be algorithmically kind of giving them preference. They say it's because responsive is easier to crawl and index, but we see boosts when sites go responsive, also when they go faster. It's easier for them to crawl and index. You know, it's not hard math.
Yeah. Yes.
Hello. All right. Thanks for the talk. One thing that I struggle with is some of the terminology in the page speed insights tool, like explaining to another marketer or business person what lossless compression is, or proxy caching, all that. Are you aware of a guide that would be for like dumb people when it comes to technical that we could explain to other marketers?
So I think the question is, help us with Google Page Speed tool. It's really confusing. Okay. Yes, it is very confusing, and it talks about a lot of things that most SEOs are not used to talking about. I'm one of them that's used to talking about it much more. But all of the Google Page Speed results click over to details about how to improve the situation, and things like the lossless compression for images, they actually do that for you in the tool. So they take your image, they compress it, and they say, why don't you just save this version? We did it for you so that we won't have to flag this one again.
Oh, that's amazing. Last question. So, normal people want to test their mobile SEO. What are the best tools out there for analyzing and doing that sort of stuff?
So I'm leaning heavily on Google PageSpeed tool, especially looking at the beta stuff, because if they can, my philosophy is if they can include it in the Google PageSpeed tool or anything where you just put in a URL and it gives you a readout, then it's easily something they could gather in a crawl. And so even if they're not using those things in the algorithm quite yet, they will be soon, but I think a lot of them are some of the 200+ factors. They may be small factors, but Google's been playing with the weighting of especially mobile ranking factors a lot. And so start there. Mobile Moxie has a tool set, and we're in the process of really ramping up and improving the tools, so check them out.
That is mobilemoxie.com.
Mobilemoxie.com, sorry, I had to throw it in there. No, not, you know, they're cool. And what else do I use? Well, so Google PageSpeed has plugins too, and that's easier if you're going behind a firewall. But the plugins, the scores, they don't always match. So ignore those scores, or just write them down and don't cry about them, because they change from the iterations of the tools and the plugins. They're kind of weird.
All right, Cindy Krum, thank you.
Okay.
Excellent.